Hey Flexers, today we're going to take a look at the recent changes to the Huddle report, as well as do an overview on the analytics dashboard and give you a bit of framework on what you're looking at there and how you can use that in your practice. The Huddle improvements as well as the analytics dashboard are available in 5.0 and up in Flex, so you'll want to make sure that you are updated beyond at least version 5.0. And you can always check your version by logging into Flex and clicking the Flex logo in the upper right. From there, you'll let Flex know you do want to check for an update, and it'll tell you if there's an update available or, like me, if you're already using the latest version. The first thing I want to mention in terms of the Huddle Access and the Analytics dashboard is the user preferences that you can set up. If you're logged into Flex as an admin user, you can come up to your settings, go into Server, and then click User Setup. From there, you're going to see a few new toggles added to each user. Allow KPI dashboard and allow financial graphs on the Huddle report. Now, you have always had control over which one of your users can see the Huddle at all, but because we added financial information on the Huddle report, you can also decide which one of your users has access to that information. For any of your users that you disable access, they just won't see those options available. So it's not going to be evident that there's an option there they don't have access to. They simply won't see the information display on the screen. Now, if you do have access to the analytics, we'll start there. You can come up into Huddle/Reports and click on the Analytics button. Again, for any users who don't have access to the Analytics dashboard, this button is not going to display at all. Now, when you first click into the dashboard, you're going to see all of the graphs on the same page. You'll notice a few different trends here. So production by provider type and income by provider type are both grouped by doctor and hygiene. What we've done is group the restorative providers in your practice, as well as those who are marked as secondary in open dental. This lets us know which providers we could expect to be doing restorative procedures and putting them in a group, as well as which of your providers are doing hygiene so you can track trends both ways. On the dashboard, you also have this little info icon here. We'll update this with important information as new releases come out, but it does let you know the most important piece there is that paragraph in the middle, letting you know that you can click on any of the variables to hide or unhide them from the graph. For example, maybe in the production by provider type, we only want to see our hygiene. We can click the doctor button and it'll remove that with the scratch through. And then you can also see just the hygiene. You could remove both of them if you wanted to, if you had others you wanted to look at, or you can keep both of them on the graph. Now, if we look at each of these graphs individually and account for what they should be measuring in your practice, production by provider type on the dashboard is letting you see how your providers are trending. We're always looking at a rolling 12-month period, so as the month rolls over to the next, we'll update the graph as well. And then in the production by month graph, we're looking at the entire office as a whole. The dashboard view does look at adjusted production. So if you are a PPO practice, then we're going to be looking at your adjusted production there. Now we also have the income by provider type graph, and that looks at the income by each provider group. And then on the individual graph, which I'll show in just a moment, it'll break it down by specific provider. The reappointment rate is measuring on the dashboard the office as a whole. The individual graph will show it by each provider. And we're looking at patients who came into the practice in that month, saw that provider, and then scheduled their next appointment. So the goal for the reappointment rate is obviously to be as high as possible. And if we have any months that are trending downward, we want to take a look and see if anything changed during that time, and we can identify why patients aren't reappointing. The patient attrition graph is going to represent patients that came into the practice, and on that month, they are 18 months from their last appointment and they don't have the next appointment scheduled. So we're looking at those patients as having gone inactive with the office. Now, that doesn't mean that their open dental status has changed. We haven't automatically changed them from patient to inactive, but in our purposes of looking at patients who are actively engaging with the practice, the patient attrition rate is going to allow us to see exactly how many patients are leaving the practice essentially. So they've been 18 months without an appointment and they don't have anything else scheduled. Those are patients we're going to want to take action on, which is coming in a future update to the dashboard. Your new patient count here is also looking at the number of new patients with completed appointments in those months. And then down at the bottom, we've got the aging AR graph. Now, any of these graphs, you can hover over specific categories to be able to see the data that makes up those categories. Same thing applies here for the bar graphs, as well as even the data points on the line graphs. In the aging AR, we have your total balance along the outside edge, and then we break it down into 0 to 30 days, 30 to 60 days, 60 to 90, and then over 90 days. Now, if we look at each one of these on their individual graphs, so we'll start with the production by provider type. On the dashboard, we look at it by provider type. Again, we've grouped by doctor and hygiene. But if we look at it on its individual graph, we're looking at production by provider specifically. Now, I'm working with a smaller database of information, so it's likely that your graph is going to look a bit different with information here. And you can hover over any of these bars to be able to see exactly what that provider produced in that month. Again, with all the individual graphs, you have the opportunity to select or deselect any of those options if you want to view specific providers or look at trends that way. If we move next to the production by month, on the dashboard view, we look at the total adjusted production for the whole office. And on the individual view, we look at adjusted production, gross production, which is going to be your total amount produced before any write-offs. And then we're also looking at write-offs and adjustments. So you can hover over these graphs again to see data. Another important piece of this is that we do highlight adjustments. So it's really important for the practice to make sure that we're monitoring the adjustments that are made, and you'll be able to easily do that in the production by month graph. Income by provider on the dashboard view is broken down as the office as a whole, but we look at the doctor and provider groups. However, in the individual group, we're looking at each provider separately. And again, here you can always select and deselect all of our providers. Now you can see if there's any negative production or income in this graph here as well, which is going to be helpful for monitoring things like refunds and any money that's given back to a patient, just to make sure we can stay on top of any trends like that. Your reappointment rate is going to be a line graph by provider. If you see any of these individual dots here, that's likely representing a provider who is only in the practice for that month, or maybe it's someone who comes occasionally. So perhaps they were here, like this example for me, this provider was here in July, they were here in December and January, which is all the way up here at the top at that 100% reappointment rate. And then they were also here in March. So we can make sure that you're able to spot trends for your continuous providers, and you're also aware of your maybe more intermittent or temporary hygienists who come to the practice. You can see where their numbers stack up as well, even if they're not in the office consistently. Now, patient attrition. This one for me, I've only got one data point, but you're going to see a line graph just like you would on the reappointment rate, and it'll do the same thing. So if you've got a provider who's there only intermittently, we'll show you those dots, and any provider who is there month over month, we'll be able to connect the dots and show you the lines in the trend. Now, the new patient count is going to be broken down by provider on the individual graph. If you'll remember on the dashboard, it was collective for the practice. So we can see our new patients by provider here. And then the aging AR graph just makes the circle a bit bigger and easier for you to see. Now, with the dashboard view, you can always come back to the dashboard with this dashboard button at the top. And then to get to any of the individual click-in graphs, you just click their link right at the top. Now, the second piece of the video that I wanted to discuss today are the improvements we made to the Huddle report. So we can come back into that Huddle/reports icon, and this time we're going to head into Huddle. Now, if you've got the Huddle disabled as a whole for any of your users, they're not going to see that Huddle button. And if you have the Huddle enabled for them, but you have the financial graphs removed, they'll still be able to see the Huddle button, but they won't see this month to date section in the middle. Now we do have a very informative info icon for you here that gives you some more information on how these details are obtained throughout the Huddle report. If we look at the overall purpose of the Huddle report and why it exists in Flex, we know that a lot of our offices spend time in the morning with their team, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. We gather together in the lunch area or maybe around a computer in the front office. We take a look at the patients on the schedule. We call out anybody who needs special attention or anyone that we know we need to handle a detail for. We'll make sure that the entire office is aware. So what we've done on the Huddle report is giving you a look at the patients that are on the schedule for today. We do include your notes from Open Dental, as well as their next appointment if they've got one scheduled, so you can easily visualize if somebody is not reappointed. Again, that ties into that reappointment graph, making sure that the patients on the schedule do have appointments. And then recall overdue here. We're going to make sure that you are aware of patients that need to be seen in hygiene. We'll pull in balances, insurance estimates for their visit that day, as well as the patient amount and the total due, which would combine the patient amount here and the balance. And then we'll also list any providers or hygienists we would see for that patient that day. Now, the month-to-date graph is newly added here. What we're doing is taking a look at your progress as the month rolls along. So production, income, and collections rate. You can set a goal for the practice. So let's say we want our production goal to be $10,000 this month. We can click update. Oh, I entered 100. Let me enter 10,000. Okay, I'll get my zeros right here. There we go. So now we've got our production goal at $10,000. Around the outside edge, that's going to track your actual production or income total. So that will let you know you have X number of dollars remaining to meet your goal. In my case, I am way behind. My production is negative 112. So it's telling me that I've got $10,112 left to meet of my $10,000 monthly goal. The circle in the middle is telling you where you should be today to be on track for meeting your goal at the end of the month. Now you'll notice that this information is in yellow, and that's because it's alerting me visually that I am behind on my goal. When you are at your goal or you're above your goal, the text will be green. Now, once we move through the month, you'll notice this inner ring will grow, and that's because as we progress through the month, we need to be closer and closer to our target. The same premise applies with our income. So let's say our income for the month is only $50. Now we've already collected $96. So if we hover here, it'll let us know that our current income is 96 and we are $83 ahead of target for the day. Now it's also letting me know that we are at 192% of my goal, whereas in production, we're at negative 1% of our goal. So we're always going to put the information that you need right in the middle of the circle with additional details along the outside and the inside rings when you hover. Now the collections rate is a little bit different. This collections rate wouldn't be changing through the month. So if your collections rate is 99%, there wouldn't be a time where your collection rate would be 30%. So we've removed the inner circle here, and we just always make sure that we can see what our current collection rate is and how far below our monthly target it is. If you ever want to remove a goal, you could just click into it and go ahead and click 0 and update, and it'll remove the goal from the ring. You can change those at any time, and they do carry over month, so you don't have to set them each month. Now the next section are these today and yesterday info boxes. Now this is going to look at patients on my schedule today. So I've got nothing scheduled for production. I've got no pre-med patients scheduled, and I have no new patients scheduled. For your practice, as we would look at production, what we're doing there is looking at the adjusted production estimate. So our aim is for that production total at the beginning of the day to be as close as possible to what actually happens at the end of the day. So we take your gross production. We also include any anticipated adjustments that are attached to those procedure codes or appointments. And then we include any insurance write-offs as those claims are created as well. If you have any patients that are selected for pre-med, that's going to be displaying a list of names here. And the patients that are listed both here in this section as well as here at the top, if you click on their names, will actually link you back to the patient profile in Flex. Your new patient count here will be updated as your day goes along. And of course, if you start with more than one or more than zero, rather, new patients, that count will be accurate for you. Now, yesterday is looking at your previous day. It'll tell you your total production, so that's going to be gross production, as well as your adjusted production, the income you collected in the day, the number of new patients with completed appointments, your case acceptance rate. So what we're doing when we're looking at case acceptance is we are looking at, of all of the patients that you put in a treatment plan procedure code, what percentage of those patients moved forward with at least one procedure code in a future appointment. So it's okay that they didn't schedule their entire treatment. That's not what we're measuring. Instead, what we're measuring is how many of them said yes to at least the next phase. Now, the hygiene reappointment rate is measuring how many patients were seen for prophylactic procedures or perio and how many of them reappointed next time. So you want to make sure that your hygiene program in the practice is healthy and we're always getting those patients reappointed for the next visit. And of course, we are also measuring our broken appointment count here to have an idea on how many appointments are being broken. Now, the great thing about the huddle is we've added this date dynamic to it. So we have the ability to go back in time. We can look at previous days, like this day perhaps. We can see our numbers are slightly different here. So if we want to look at trends, maybe we want to say, how many broken appointments did we have last week? You can look through the week that way. When you're ready to come back home, you can click this Today button, or you can always skip ahead. One thing that I think is really helpful here, which I'll get a bit ahead of myself, but one of the features that I love is we can go to a date in the future, and we can add a note in this note box. So maybe we say, today is Steph's birthday, and we'll save our note. Now that might not be important to us today, so we'll come back to today and we'll see that our note is blank. But when we go back to that future date, and I believe I was on May 25th, we can see that information. So as you're preparing for your day or your week, or you've got something important coming up, it's really easy to make notes for yourself to see in the huddle. We've also got this aging claims section that's going to put information right in front of you for claims that are older than 30 days. We'll let you know their status as well as the type of claim that they are. And then the X-ray requested field relates back to a field in Open Dental, which you can select yes or no in. If a patient has yes selected in that field, we're going to display them here because it means they've asked your office to get X-rays from their previous dentist. Once you select no in that field, it'll remove them from the list to let us know that we don't have any pending X-ray requests. Now, of course, if you ever have any questions, you've always got access to our support team right here at the bottom. And then the other thing that's great is you have access to our Help Center articles. So if you're looking at the huddle, maybe we want to say, you know what, let's go ahead and just look at this report. We can open it up in our browser and we can see all of these details. In the Help Center, we have created several different resources for you. So in the text guides area, we can scroll down here to the reports and huddle. We have a text guide for the analytics dashboard, and we have a text guide for the huddle. And then if we look at our video guides, we have got analytics/reporting in our video guides, and we've got an analytics video as well as a huddle report video. So if you ever want to come back to it, you've got a lot of information on the Help Center, not just on these topics, but all of Flex is generally represented here with some sort of article, whether that's a text or a video, and you've got always access to our support team here as well. It was great to chat with you today, and I look forward to our next webinar.